Hello, everybody. This is Eli. Welcome back to Elf Bait. Got in a discussion with a friend of mine at work today, and he was asking me some advice on how to approach the development of his campaign. He had a campaign that he had been running for a while, but he's coming back to it again. And so he was asking me how much is too much. And part of his questioning was brought to him by Kickstarter he had read. Unfortunately, I can't recall what Kickstarter was, but it was basically some sort of 100 adventures sort of thing or something like that to put out throughout your campaign. And so what he was asking me is really what I felt was necessary, what was too much, what was too little. And that's kind of a hard one for me to answer for him, just matter of factly. And the reason for that is that it really depends on what kind of campaign you're wanting to have. So pace is going to have a lot to do with how many adventures and how many magic items and stuff you give out. If you want a low magic setting, or you want a setting where the party is expected to run from most of the powerful enemies and only fight really the mundane ones, you want to keep the power level low, and you're probably going to want to keep those adventurers small, or have major adventures that are peppered with little kind of one-shot encounters. But as I was talking to him about this, we started comparing this to the Lord of the Rings again. It's a good example. Lots of people know it. Matt Colville used it. That's the video that actually got me into even considering doing this kind of stuff, because it was really a very apt example. Now, his example, it was combining railroading, or comparing railroading to kind of an open-ended campaign. And in this instance, though, I was trying to talk to my friend, about what you really need to make a campaign succeed. And personally, when I'm running a campaign, I try not to have too many set-piece adventures. I try not to have too many specific things that have to happen. I learned a long time ago that, first of all, you can't predict for the party. Your players are always going to come up with some wacky solution or other thing to do that's going to change. Well, let's be honest, it's going to mess up your best plans. So what I like to do is I like to have several anchor encounters or adventures that really set the stage. Now, I will also often have a lot of things in the back of my head, things that might come along the way. And using Lord of the Rings as an example, I kind of feel that there's only three things that have to happen for Lord of the Rings as a campaign to work. Clearly, there's the beginning, obviously. There's Rivendell, and then there's Mordor. I mean, you really actually just have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Now, a lot of people are probably screaming and arguing that there's a lot more necessary to the story, but we're thinking about this from a tabletop campaign standpoint, not a story, not a book. In a tabletop campaign, sure, we have the halflings that start off in the Shire. We have the quest giver. Gandalf shows up. There is some cool role play with him. There's role play with Bilbo, where we actually, that's kind of even off camera, but there's the scene where the quest giver gives the ring, and kind of things get set in motion. So from there, though, if this is a tabletop game, we don't know how the hobbits are going to proceed. In this case, the quest giver has said they have to go to Bree, and they're supposed to meet him there, and so they're going to head that direction. But we don't know, as a DM, you're not going to know what route they're going to take. So while in the story they set out on foot, they walk along the road, they keep themselves low key. It's very possible that instead they went with a cart, maybe they went overland instead of through the woods on the road. The players are going to change it up here. So this gives you some opportunity for different encounters. This is where you have to be able to flex and roll. They get to Bree. They meet Strider. Aragorn's there. He's waiting for them. What if Aragorn's player and the rest of the halflings decide that they have a different plan of action. What if they actually decide to take on a wraith? Now, this is unlikely, but players can be unpredictable, especially if Aragorn is feeling really rangery and he's feeling really tough. He might actually jump into it and really want to take on a wraith, maybe take out one or two. Also, depending on the overland route that they took, as a DM, you may have had them go through some other encounters. Maybe they met some bandits or something that the halflings have gained some experience. I mean, a jump from level 1 to 2 is not very bad, not very huge. And so, possibly by the time they even get to Bree, in a tabletop game, they may have had a couple of encounters. So from there, where do they go? Well, there's a big, long quest that has a couple of little side encounters on the way to Rivendell. But for the party themselves, it's not a very major event. I mean, there's a lot of other stuff going on, in the world. That's all, at a tabletop game, that's all in the DM's head. Unless he's using cutscenes, you're not going to see that. So as a tabletop game, you're probably, from Bree, you're going to have a number of different encounters. Because it is a tabletop game, you're more than likely going to have some encounters with goblins, maybe other bandits, some role-playing encounters along the way in different towns and villages. Now, every point along that way is a way where the story could completely veer off the tracks from the way it appears in the story or the movies or the books. While they're in a town, halflings might hear a rumor of something. Player says, I'm going to go listen around for some rumors. Maybe they hear about some rumors of ghostly lights in some hills to the north. So the party decides to go investigate those. And they run into some spooky things. Or maybe they run into goblins or something like that. It's little side adventures. Again, we're talking tabletop campaign. So tabletop campaigns often have these little divergences. Now, these divergences can go real big. Maybe they decide to bypass the overland route to Rivendell. Maybe they decide to bypass the foot quest all along. At some point, maybe they get turned around and they decide to go west to the coast. They get to Bree, they're like, we're to the coast, we can go to the coast, we can grab a boat. We'll just sail. We'll sail around and come up from the south. Players are going to do stuff like this for you. Again, if you had too many adventures set in that path, even just from Bree to Rivendell, as a DM, you're going to feel kind of tense and anxious if you had too much planned. I mean, you certainly want to have plans of things that they can run into and things that are going to be there if they take that course. There's nothing wrong with it, but you want to make sure you're flexible. So anyways, let's cut to Rivendell. So you get to Rivendell. We meet with Elrond. I almost said Elric. That would be a bad encounter. You don't want to run into Elric at Rivendell. Although, tabletop game. Maybe it's not Elrond. Maybe it's Elric. Anyways, so here's where we get the rest of our party. But we get some party members that have some pretty influential connections. And this is where the adventure could really go off the rails. I mean, early on, we got a bunch of low-level halflings and a more experienced, ranger who are traveling. The wizard is really not there. He's kind of comes and goes. Did the encounter with the wraiths at Weathertop even happen? Did we see the cool horse trick at the river? Is Frodo even injured by the time they get to Rivendell? Who knows? So we get to Rivendell. We get some new characters, all of which have connections. You've got Gimli, who is connected to a dwarven kingdom. You got Legolas, whose dad is the king of the wood elves in Mirkwood. You've got Boromir, who is the son of the steward of Gondor. You got these three characters who suddenly join the party, and any one of them has background connections that could really derail your campaign. So they leave Rivendell. What if Legolas's players like, hey, you know what? We should head to Rivendell. My dad's the king. We can get some help. You halflings are kind of shabbily set up. We'll go there. I'll talk to my dad. Maybe we'll get you some equipment. Boromir, maybe he's like, you know what? We got to beeline it for Gondor. You know, there's some role playing. The party says, Gondor. I mean, let's get there. Minas Tirith, it's a big city. It's defensible. Players' minds work in really odd ways. So at this point, you're in two different directions. I mean, Gimli could be like, hey, why don't we go back to my people? We can use the secret dwarf ways to sneak our way east instead of having to go walking around. So again, here we get to another setting, where another point in the story where, depending on what the party does, they may not go with the way of the book. We may not end up in Lothlorien. We may not end up in Moria. While those are good dungeon crawls, while Moria is more of a dungeon crawl, and Lothlorien is more of a social encounter. But in a D&D type game, who knows what kind of encounters they would have had in Lothlorien. It's a big wild forest. It's controlled by the elves, but there's stuff in it. But if they go to Mirkwood, are they going to have spider encounters? If they go through the mountains and try to go to Gimli's people, are they going to end up, running into some other encounter arc? Maybe they while they're in the woods, and maybe they do go to Lothlorien, and as they're leaving, maybe the party doesn't split up. Maybe Frodo and Sam stay with the party. Perhaps the Fellowship never divides itself throughout the entirety of the story. Ultimately, they're going to get the guy. There's a lot of supposition and maybe stuff. I think you're getting the point here, which is that along that way, in a tabletop campaign, anybody who's played D&D long enough is going to know that any one of those choices that came up in the story of The Lord of the Rings could have gone a number of different ways. If the party never splits up, maybe they never even get Smeagol. Do they end up in Gondor with an intact Boromir? And what does that have on the effect of Gondor? I mean, is the Steward of Gondor with his champion son going to be there? Is he going to actually rally the troops? And is something more effective going to happen in dealing with, the Wraiths and the Easterlings and everything coming on? Who knows? And so, again, when you're building kind of taking it back, when you're building a campaign, have the important things. It could be more than the 3 that are spelled out here. You could have more important things. Like if you wanted to build this, you could sit there and say, okay, I want Shire, Rivendell. We've got a really cool dungeon delve that is Moria. Here's an interesting point too about when you're dealing with the campaign. Moria as a dungeon delve. Let's say the party decides to follow Gimli's and players' advice and they go to Gimli's people. As a DM, you could go ahead and actually just port your Moria adventure into Gimli's people's setting. Instead of getting there and finding a desolated, destroyed dwarfhold, maybe they get there and they find that the dwarfhold is under siege from something down below, and it becomes kind of a mini conflict that the players have to deal with. It still gets them running. They still have the Balrog encounter. You can still have that planned event in your back of your head where you're like, I'm going to take Gandalf out of the mix. That NPC is going to go away. The NPC quest giver who keeps coming and going is going to disappear. It's going to motivate the players. You could do that, and that could be ported over. Just kind of like earlier when I was talking about, let's say they go to Mirkwood instead of Lothlorien, the interplay between the characters and Galadriel could be changed up to be the interplay between the players and Legolas's father, whose name escapes me right now. I know, bad Tolkien. But it's going to be a different interchange. His knowledge base is going to be different, and he's not going to be the super powerful Galadriel, but he is still an elf lord, and so that could be different. But anyways, you could definitely build it to where you have Moria as a set encounter. It's going to happen no matter what. The meeting with the elf lord is going to happen no matter what. You just kind of port it around depending on where it goes. Gondor encounter could be a set thing, where they get to Minas Tirith and they're dealing with the Steward. But it really comes down to, is it going to be the whole party? Is it going to be just Merry and Pippin, or in this case, just was it Merry and just Pippin and Gandalf? What all happens? Does the party all get involved with Rohan and the siege at Helm's Deep? God, so much Tolkien. To put the Tolkien stuff to rest, though, at this point, I think what I'm trying to say is, when you're planning these games, all of that seems like a mountain of stuff, but it really comes down to some set ideas that you as a DM have scribbled out in outline form. Spend some time on those adventures, but you don't want to spend too much time on them ahead of time until you know that the players are going there. Have the framework of your dwarf hold encounter. Have the framework of your elven forest encounter. Have your key NPCs written up and have those possibilities. Like, okay, I know that Lothlorien has Galadriel, Mirkwood has the King of the Wood Elves, who's a little batshit. We've got, Moria is this, and I can't remember where Gimli's from, so sue me. Maybe it's like this. It just, and then you're gonna pepper in all these other encounters in there. If they went by sea, completely different story if they went by sea. And you're not doing a bad job if you're not planning all this stuff ahead. I think a lot of new DMs especially are getting buried under the idea that they have to plan all of this stuff out. And you really don't have to. There's something to be said for brevity. I've run entire night sessions just off of a note card. I note down 2 or 3 things that I want to have happen, and everything else gets filled in. Your players don't need to know what's going on the other side of the screen, and as long as you have done the brainstorming ahead of time, even if you don't have everything hard coded, you don't need to write a publishable adventure. You're still gonna have a good campaign, even if it goes off the rails. As long as you know what is what and where things are, and what easily transfers, point by point. The Balrog encounter, maybe you really are set on that Balrog, so maybe the Balrog never happens in a dwarf hold. Maybe the Balrog doesn't happen until they get to Gondor. Maybe they get to Gondor and you decide that Sauron has pulled up he's summoned up this Balrog, and he's sending this Balrog to lead the siege against Minas Tirith, which would be a great way to change that out if the whole party ends up getting to Minas Tirith without actually having lost anybody or encountered the Balrog. Put a Balrog out there, bam, that first wave that hits, you got a Balrog attacking the city, everybody's gonna freak the crap out, then you got a wave of wraiths. Then here comes the Orc army, you got Grond, all that fun stuff. There's the duel between, the Witch King and, Aemir, and, you just have all this stuff, or Eowyn, excuse me, pardon me, it was Eowyn. You don't have to have a ton of stuff already written down. This has been kind of a rambly video. Do apologize. But it's just, it came out of this discussion at work, and I really thought that dissecting the Lord of the Rings as a tabletop campaign, from the planning point of view, not as like Matt Calva's example is great. It's amazing. If you ever want to try and explain to somebody what DMing is in the different forms, that's a good way to really start them off. But it's just like, be okay as a DM with not planning. Now later on I'm going to have a video that I'm going to do which is about a lot of planning, but these are 2 different things. and I'll show you later on what that's going to be about. Anyways, how do you plan for your campaigns? What's too big for you? What's too small? What is too much or too little? What are some problems that you've run into in your games? Certainly go ahead and talk about it down below. Like, share, and subscribe. Check me out on Elfbait on Twitter, Elfbait on baittheelf at gmail.com. And, really, honestly, love hearing from you guys, having fun making videos. Back into it again. And my D&D group, while it's going to, my Monday group's going to every other week, so that's going to mean fewer updates. I'm going to start getting those out there. And at some point I'm going to go ahead and cover the Saturday group and the new Marvel superhero face rip game. And then I'm trying to figure out how to get together some online gaming. So hopefully I'll have some stuff to talk to you about in that regard. Anyways, thanks for checking it out again today. Get out and game.